Welcome. The learning today is dedicated by Bill and Sue Auerbach in memory of his father's Yahrtzeit, which is today. Refoel ben Avraham Halevi, Shamash ben Aliyah. It should be a good to better for the entire family and for all of Am Yisrael.
Amen.
We're continuing with Ein Yakov, which we're calling stories from the Talmud, which is really from Talmud, from Medrash, various different stories, anecdotes, and lessons. And this is taken from Tractate of Shabbos, page 14b, Yudalad Amud Beis. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, he instituted several enactments, 2 to be exact, which before that we did not have. Number 1 was the idea of Eruvin. Normally, biblically, you're allowed to carry from a private domain to another private domain. Okay, it's in public domain that you can't carry. But from one private to another private, you can. And Shlomo HaMelech came and he instituted something called the Eruv, that if you make the proper way, an Eruv, around both of them, then you could carry from one into the other. This was his institution, his enactment, his gzeira, in a positive way. The second thing that he did was netilas yadayim, washing one's hands. Before a person touches kachim, before he touches holy things, things that are either part of the tithing process, they belong to the kohen for whatever reason, he said you should wash your hands before you partake in it. As now, normally you can't touch it if you're impure, but hands are very active, and you don't always notice exactly where your hands have touched. So before you go and touch, eat truma, even though you're pure, as far as you know, you didn't go into a cemetery or other things that would render a person spiritually impure, nonetheless, he said you should wash your hands. Now, Chachamim have added to that, not just for kachim, but also truma, which is another form of food that belongs, it has to be given to the kohen. And in addition, we also have a gzeira before you have bread in general, in order not to forget this concept that a person should wash their hands before you eat bread. It's a halacha in the code of Jewish law. However, these 2 things come from Shlomo HaMelech, from King Solomon. So Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that at the time when Shlomo HaMelech enacted these 2 takones of Eruvin and Netilas Yadayim, Yahrtzeit Baskol v'Amra, a heavenly voice came out of heaven and declared, B'ni im chacham libecha yismach libi gam ani. As your heart is wise, my heart is also rejoicing, which means I'm pleased with these enactments that you have done. It's a positive thing, it's a good thing. Another verse that's brought in Mishlei, in Ecclesiastes, says, Chacham b'ni v'samach libi v'ashiva cherfi davar. Ashiva cherfi davar, I return to my shame, so to speak, a thing, represents the following teaching. That up until Shlomo HaMelech enacted both of these, one could have said that maybe it was a selfish reason or a personal reason why he did it. He wanted to be able to carry from one domain to the other, so he said, let's make an Eruv. It's kosher, it's the right way, everything is fine, but how do we really know, and this is what the heavenly voice is implying, what his motives were? Maybe his motives were for himself. It's still okay, but it doesn't carry the same rejoicing in heaven when you did something because of personal interest. But when you, Shlomo HaMelech, went and you made another takana for Netilas Yadayim, which is not something, washing your hands is not something which is a convenience, it's actually an inconvenience. You don't always have water around you. You don't always have the time. It's a nuisance to go out of your way to find the water and so on. Why is he doing that? He's enacting it because he wants to have the proper respect. There should be the right attitude and approach towards eating food that has a holiness to it. So once that happens, the pasuk, the verse tells us that the heavenly voice came out and said that it was wise, my son, which means what you did was a smart thing, and my heart rejoices. Because now I see that the second enactment shows me also on the first, that you did it for the right reasons. You're not just doing stuff that, hey, you want to be able to carry, so you made an Eruv. On the topic of Eruv, I'll mention that in one of the large neighborhoods in New York, when the Eruv was made, the Rebbe expressed that is a positive thing. It doesn't have to be publicized that the Eruv is there, but there are people that don't know about Shabbos and they carry anyways. And by having an Eruv there, you're helping them, you're preventing them from carrying or violating the Shabbos. They don't even know about the Eruv, they would have carried anyways. The fact is that because of an Eruv, they're now safe, and their carrying is not in a violation of Shabbos. The Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Parnach said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, if somebody carries a Sefer Torah uncovered, Arem literally means naked, but it means if the Torah is not covered in its mental. Okay, Torah has a beautiful cover, whether it's velvet, today they're making it out of leather as well. It's respect, it's honor for the Sefer Torah. And if you are holding the Torah and it's not covered, it's disrespectful. And as a punishment, says the Gemara, again, this is from Rabbi Parnach, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that person will be buried Arem naked as well without clothing. So punishment obviously is disrespect. What he did was disrespectful, so he'll end up being buried without clothing. And the Gemara says, you think it means literally without clothing? Arem sokodaitach, you think that's the case? We never heard in any situation historically that it was authorized to bury someone that way, regardless of who he was, regardless of what transgressions he may or may not have done. That's a level that nobody is subject to. To bury someone without the shrouds, without the proper respect, is not something that's done. Rabbi Zera explained, let me clarify, what does it mean when it says Orem, that he'll be buried naked? It means Orem beloy mitzvahs. He is naked from mitzvahs. There's a term in Chazal among our sages to describe a person that doesn't have any good deeds, or very little. He's naked of mitzvahs. He doesn't have mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are known as garments. They surround you, they protect you, they have a certain aura about you. Torah is compared to food. You take it inside, it becomes part of you just like food does. Mitzvah surrounds you. Mitzvahs are like garments. So the punishment for a person who carries the Torah when it's not covered, which is disrespectful, is that they lose their mitzvahs. Even the merit that they have because of mitzvahs is taken away from them. The Gemara challenges that and says, really? You want to tell me that the sin of not being so respectful to the Torah deletes all your mitzvahs? That doesn't make sense. It can't possibly mean that. Arden from the mitzvahs. Don't think it means that a person loses all their mitzvahs. Rather, it means that you lose that particular mitzvah, the mitzvah of Torah. Learning Torah, taking care of the Torah, covering the Torah is a very big schos, a very big merit. And if a person disrespects the Torah, they'll lose that merit. So to clarify, we didn't change anything. We just explained what it means. And we said he gets buried naked. It means naked from mitzvahs. And further, what that means is that particular mitzvah, the mitzvah of Torah, doesn't get rewarded for that because he was disrespectful to the Torah and carrying it that way. That was a teaching from Rabbi Parnach in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Shimon ben Shatach tiking ksuba leisha. Shimon, the son of Shatach, established a ksuba for a woman. Now, ksuba is a marriage document which says that the husband is obligated to pay his wife a certain penalty if he divorces her, which is the earliest document protecting the rights of women in marriage. There's nothing before that. Judaism is the earliest place for this. Now, he enacted the following, that it's not enough that a person obligates himself and writes in the ksuba that they'll give their wife X if something happens. They have to take land, if they have any land, and that land automatically gets collateralized for this debt that they're going to owe their wife. Okay? What happens is as follows. Let's assume that they pass away. Now, the wife gets a certain amount of the money of her ksuba she gets. It's hers, even if he didn't divorce her. Okay? Inheritance will go to her kids, to his kids, but the money of the ksuba goes to her. What if the kids took all the money, ran away, or they spent the money, or he had no money? All he has is land. Can you say that the land is going to go to pay the debt of his ksuba to her? Okay? You think it's obvious, right? It's not obvious because there's two types of funds that exist in a person's estate, and if it's not liquid, not necessarily could you just take it and give it to her because it produces fruit and it's an income producing and so on. It's a little more complex. But this was an enactment that Shimon ben Shaddach said that we're going to take it and be meshabed it, that now any money from anything that he owns, even if it is real estate, land, it should go to pay her the penalty that she, not the penalty, but the amount that she deserves based on what was committed to her in the ksubah. Now, another enactment he did, he said, "V'gazar tuma al klei mataches." When you have metal, a metal dish, a metal instruments, they could become ritually impure. Certain things have the status of a keli, it's a dish, it's a vessel, and if someone that was in contact with a dead body, it didn't go through the purification process, and he touches that, that becomes impure. And if that touches food, it can make the food impure and so on. So he said, not only does this apply for regular vessels, but even for metal, it also applies. The Gemara says, 1 second. You don't need an enactment from Shimon ben Shaddach to tell you that metal is included in this impurity. We have a pasuk in the Torah. It's a we're biblically informed. In Bamidbar it says, "Ach es hazahav ve'es hakasav," gold and silver becomes impure. Now, gold and silver are a type of metal. So what's he coming to tell us? We know this already. Made this new enactment. We know that metal, from the Torah we know that metal is susceptible to tumor, to impurity. So what it answers, we only need it for old impurity. What it means is as follows. If somebody has a vessel, he has, let's just say, a metal pot, okay, and the pot broke, it got ruined, okay, and it broke into pieces. Now it's not a vessel anymore, so it can't become tummy. And then he brought the vessel together again. Now it's like new, right? You took it, you soldered it, you fixed it, you made a new vessel. Should you say that it carries over the impurity from what it was before, but now it's a new vessel? It was rendered an unvessel. It wasn't a vessel anymore. It was broken. Now you brought it back to a good state, or you made a totally new vessel out of that metal. You recycled it. Does it carry the impurity? That is the enactment of Shimon ben Shaddach, that it does carry through, because biblically, if you broke the vessel, it wouldn't carry. And that's what he was instituting, that should be impure as well, and you have to purify it. The mikvah, whatever has to be done to purify this vessel. Amar Rav said an interesting story. Ma'aseh b'Shaltzion HaMalka. There's a story with Shaltzion, the queen, who really was his sister. She was married to Yanai HaMelech. And Yanai was a king during the second Beis HaMikdash. After he died, his wife, the queen, she was the queen and really had the charge for 9 years. Okay, she once made a party or a wedding for her son, which was Rav's nephew. She's getting ready and whatever, and all of her dishes got tummy. I don't know if somebody walked in or somebody passed away. Whatever happened over there, everything became impure. So she had an idea. She went and she broke all of her dishes. And then she was a queen, right? So Vishibrasan, she broke them. She gave it to a welder or a person that could make metal dishes. Let's say it was gold, silver, whatever it was. And he boiled and made them very, very hot. And he made out of it new dishes. So everything is fine. But our sages said, no. It's not going to work. They go back to their original impurity. By the way, those that are watching online, YouTube, Facebook, welcome. Make sure you subscribe, share, and put a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Thank you. My time. What's the reason that our sages insisted that even though they were broken, which really is not a keli anymore, if it's not a keli, it can't become tummy? Why did they say, you got to kosher, you got to purify it anyways? The answer is they wanted to make sure that this halacha of mechatas, that things that are impure have to be purified, should not end up being neglected or forgotten. Everyone's going to do that. Your pot got ruined, right? Just go smash it, break it, whatever. Take it to a welder, take it to a silversmith, and say, listen, I need a pot. I have some stuff. I need a spoon, whatever. And no one's going to be purifying it anymore. So to protect that we shouldn't lose this halacha and this important mitzvah of mechatos, we said that we're going to apply, this is what Shimon ben Shatach instituted, that if your dish broke and then you fixed it afterwards, the tumah will carry over. And obviously they have the ability to enact something like that. I just want to mention that when it comes to rabbinic enactments, there's a formula of how it's done. They can't just show up and say whatever they want. Okay? There's a process of how it's done. It applies to certain things. For example, they can't add a new mitzvah. They could create an enactment to protect a mitzvah or something like that. They could do things that will be accepted by most of the Jewish people. Certain things you can't just come up and say, no one will accept it. There's many, many different things that go into play of doing an enactment, and probably first and foremost, you're not adding anything to Torah. You can't add any new mitzvahs. That's a biblical prohibition. You can't say now there's 614 mitzvahs. Okay. Let's continue. Amar Hillel l'Shammai. Hillel said to Shammai. Hillel, as we know, was known as the more lenient one, if you will. There's stories of how he was more understanding or understanding could be misunderstood. Let's just go with lenient or softer. And Shammai was more strict, a no-nonsense type of approach, where things are the way they're supposed to be, and he tends to be more machmir, more strict in halachic rulings. One time Hillel said to Shammai, you taught that when a person is squeezing grapes to make wine, to make grape juice, okay? So in order for something to become impure, it has to have certain steps to render it possible to become impure. It's called machshirin l'tumah. One of those steps that could make it susceptible to tumah is if it's wet. Okay. Now, if you're squeezing grapes, would the wine make the grape susceptible to tumah? And if yes, you need to use pure tools to squeeze and crush the grapes. Okay, because if it's just dry, it won't the impurity won't transfer. But if it is wet, then the impurity could transfer. So Shammai said that when it comes to to grapes, you have to be very careful and make sure that it's all pure, because the grape juice could make it susceptible to impurity. But when it comes to olives, we don't say that. You don't do that for olives. So basically what he told them was, why grapes yes and olives no? There's different terms for different fruits, what you use to describe the crushing. So you use beitzrin is the word that we use for grapes, and moiskin is the word that the Gemara uses for olives. Why the difference? So he told them in Takniteni, if you're going to tease me about this, then I'll make the decree for both. Then I'll decree the impurity also for olives. Now there's a difference, because the juice that comes out of an olive is more of a liquid as opposed to a oil. It has to go through a process. Just the squeezing that happens, that wetness, it's more of a liquid as opposed to a oil right away. There's different reasons perhaps why it could be different. Okay, so now you have a difference of opinion between Hillel and Shammai. Hillel is insisting that we should apply it to both. Shammai is saying not so fast. He even said, don't push it. Okay. So what did they do? How did they figure this out? So you have to take a vote, majority rules. Now Hillel had more students than Shammai. But regarding this halacha, many of Hillel's students were of the opinion, like Shammai, let's not make it more strict, in this case what Hillel wanted. So they're going to run out to abstain from taking a vote, because they don't want to go according to Shammai. They don't want to go against Hillel, but they agree with Shammai. They wanted to leave the shul. So what they did was, they took a sword and placed it by the door of the Beis Medrash of the study hall. And basically, nobody could leave. Everyone that's here has to stay. We're taking a vote what we should do with that halacha. Should we apply impurity also to olives or only for grapes? The liquid, that is. We'll just finish real quick. And they said anyone that came in should not go out. Anyone that went out should not come. Basically, there's no leaving here. And that day was a very difficult day for the Jewish people, as difficult as the day when the Egel Hazav, the golden calf, was constructed. Why? Because everyone was sitting in front of Shammai as if they were his student. Hillel Hazakin, who was the Nasi, he was sitting and waiting for this vote to take place, and he was a very humble person, and he was sitting with tremendous humility, which was considered to be something which is disrespectful to him from his stature as a Nasi, waiting for that election or vote about this halacha to take place. Now, we'll stop with here, and we'll be continued. Thanks for joining. Bye.
The one guy.